Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shannon Derejo from Creamer Media. Welcome to today's webinar on health and safety in industry and mining in partnership with Electra Mining Africa, South Africa's biggest trade exhibition since 1972. Our panel of industry experts will discuss advancing health and safety in South Africa's industries and mining sector. Today's webinar is sponsored by Rand Mutual Assurance, Saryx Engineering Group, and Alcohol Breathalyzers. We thank them for making this event possible. Before we start, please note that we've activated the Q&A function for your questions. Please direct any questions to the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. While we may not get to every question during our hour together, rest assured we'll review each one. Additionally, the chat feature is enabled for your comments and insights. Look for it right next to the Q&A box. Remember, though, questions should go into the Q&A to ensure that they are properly addressed in that section. Please be informed that this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be made available to you afterwards. We are also broadcasting live on YouTube and the link will be shared in the chat once it becomes accessible. Today's webinar will be facilitated by Dr. Sanjay Munnoo, the Chief Business Development Officer at the Federated Employers Mutual Assurance Company, or FEM. He is the chairperson for various committees and is the president and a fellow chartered member of the South African Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. Dr. Munnoo will facilitate the discussion with our panel, which consists of Dr. Jessica Hutchings, Head of Prevention for COID and Operations at Rand Mutual Assurance, Chris Campbell, the CEO of Consulting Engineers South Africa, Ingrid Osborne, the co-founder and CEO of Saryx Engineering Group, and Dushen Naidoo, Head of Safety and Sustainable Development at Minerals Council South Africa. Before our discussion gets underway, I'd like to tell you more about our partner for this webinar, Specialized Exhibitions Montgomery, the organizer of Electra Mining Africa exhibition. Electra Mining Africa is taking place from 2 to 6 September at Johannesburg Expo Centre in Nasrec. Electra Mining Africa, with 5 decades of accumulated experience since its inaugural show, has built a strong reputation for its ability to connect people and industries, buyers and sellers. For more information, visit their websites at www.electramining.co.za. And without further ado, I'll hand over now to our facilitator, Dr. Sanjay Munnoo, to take the proceedings forward. Over to you, Sanjay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shannon, and good afternoon to the delegates, and thank you to Creamer Media for arranging this webinar. So disruption coupled with innovation has been the norm of recent. Consequently, post the pandemic, the global economy is now in complete disarray with escalation of wars, recession, inflation rates, fuel prices, and worsening food shortages. So South Africa has its fair share of challenges coupled with deepening crisis of unemployment. The execution of and implementation of health and safety measures during these challenging times is definitely a critical aspect for health and safety practitioners and requires commitment from the workforce. Right? We have a capable panel here today, and hoping that they will be able to shed some light on these issues. We have Dr. Jessica Hutchings, and Dr. Jessica, in your opinion, what are the main causes of injuries in South Africa in the metal industry and other industry?
Thanks, Sanjay, and good afternoon to all the listeners. So Rand Mutual Assurance obviously administers workmen's compensation for diseases and injuries in the metal space and the mining sector. If we look at the type of injuries that we receive, largely from an occupational disease perspective, noise-induced hearing loss remains to be one of the top occupational diseases, both in the mining and the metal sector. And then obviously your soft tissue injuries, such as tenosynovitis, we get carpal tunnel syndrome as well. And then in terms of the actual injuries, in particular in the metal space, we get a lot of foreign body objects to the eye. And you can imagine in this type of industry where welding, etc., a lot of dust environments, we get open wound to the fingers and the thumbs, a lot of injuries to the wrist and hand, and then obviously sprain and strains in terms of the lumbar spine. In the mining sector, it's still obviously still very manually driven in terms of the type of injuries we find in the mining sector, but we also find other injuries such as respiratory conditions. We get a lot of damage to the ears. also lower limb strain and strain injuries to the ankle and the lumbar spine as well. So there's a commonality across these industries, and I think that is representative of the type of work that we see, which is still largely manually driven. These industries, as much as we're trying to do modernization and mechanization, still rely very much on people, and as a result, it has a major impact in terms of injuries, and then obviously your occupational diseases which develop over time. Mining is more exposed to diseases as a result of heat exposure, so heat exhaustion and heat cramps are still quite prominent in the mining sector.
Thank you, Jessica. And maybe to move to Dushen from the Minerals Council South Africa. So what are the major health and safety challenges that South Africa's mining industry still faces, and how should these challenges be addressed?
Greetings, Sanjay, and hello to everyone on the call. So thank you for the opportunity. In the mining industry, we've had over 270 loss of lives in 1993. And the industry has come a long way in that respect. Obviously, our drive is to get to zero harm. We've managed to reduce the number of lives by 80%. So currently, at the end of 2023, we had 55 loss of lives. So we still have a long way to go. There's many challenges. Safety is very, very convoluted in terms of the mitigation measures to alleviate the numbers. And our drive towards zero harm involves a multi-dimensional or multifaceted approach, rather. The key or the main agencies that we've seen as major contributors to the loss of lives are the fall of ground challenges that we experience on predominantly our platinum and gold mining sectors, and also the transport and machinery sector, which also accounts for numerous losses. So those are the key agencies that contribute to our fatalities and injuries to some extent. There's also a lot that we've seen in the last year, or rather this year for that matter, on the machinery side, specifically on conveyors. So we've seen an increase in conveyors this year, which is not really a common thing given the previous performance. So these are some of the major challenges in the industry at the moment. Fall of ground, transport and machinery. There's a lot of general injuries and also associated fatalities. Also, general is a category that talks to falling from heights, falling into ore passes, getting struck by tools and that sort of thing. So these are some of the major challenges. There's numerous other aspects to safety and improving safety in our mining sector, but I won't go on and on about that. I'll give the others a chance. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dushen. But maybe just to find out, what's your personal view on? Do you think zero accidents are possible on that mantra?
I absolutely think zero accidents are possible. We've seen it in other industries, in other sectors, and we're trying to learn from those industries. So essentially, I believe that the interventions and the initiatives that we have in place as a Minerals Council of South Africa, from the perspective of our fall of ground action plan, so it's very much a research and development project where the mining companies have invested heavily into it, to come up with solutions to the issues at hand. And then we have a lot of collaborative workings with international entities as well, not just on the local space, but internationally with experts who have said that control effectiveness and managing it is really the key to getting to mitigate some of these incidents. By effectively managing controls, you can reduce the number of incidents you have on site by managing leading indicators, by assessing your data and adjusting the goal as we move towards that zero. I think that's the key. So I think it is absolutely possible. We've seen from our safety milestone analysis that the industry has improved over the 10-year period. Not as much as we would have wanted to in terms of some of the unrealistic milestones that were set initially, but from a logical perspective and from an analytical point of view, we've actually reduced the number of incidents on our mining sector in South Africa.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dushen. Yeah, so maybe we'll move next to Chris from the Consulting Engineers South Africa. But before I move to you, Chris, maybe from my perspective, so I've been quite close to the George incident. And in fact, I actually traveled to the site when the building collapsed. And I must say it was absolute a disaster site, and lots of people lost their lives, right? I mean, it's something that we can't definitely move forward from. And maybe from the consulting engineer's perspective, what should the country learn from that incident? And maybe how do we prevent further incidents from occurring?
Thank you, Sanjay, and good afternoon to everyone. I think, it's really, the loss of life in the incident in George is the most unfortunate event. But I think what's important for us to realize is it was purely because of the timing that made its way into mainstream media to the extent that it did. Are accidents similar to these happening on a regular basis? There is no doubt. And that's the problem. So George was maybe a major is symptomatic of a greater problem. I mean, just down the road, there was another incident in Ballito. And people often, there's this notion that, it's minor, so it's not newsworthy. Yet, in the Ballito incident, and I'll comment on the George further, but in the Ballito incident, a collapse of an excavation, certainly, and not having been personally involved in any of the investigations, but one would have hoped that there was somebody on site supervising and ensuring that the construction regulations that relate to safety and excavations was there to inform the workforce, not leaving the workforce on their own exposed. It's for time immemorial, any excavation beyond about a meter, there would have to be measures taken because that risk is there of that kind of collapse. Now, if we go across to, and in fact, by the way, there was another incident in Limpopo also, and I think what needs to happen is more of these incidents need to be reported so that one can address not only the root causes, but what is the role of all the parties. Now, if we take the George incident, and this is no defense of the individual who was named first. Now that's not the right way to go, because in any construction project, there is a client, there's a contractor, there are multiple disciplines of engineering, of built environment practitioners involved in the project. And the fact that it's a structural collapse does not imply necessarily immediately that the engineer is at fault. It should be left to the entire investigation, because the fact of the matter is that if there were changes made and there is a team, then firstly, there should be a duty of care exercised by all professionals, and even more importantly, the client and the contractor. So, there are multiple parties, and I think more needs to be done to educate all the parties on what's their roles and responsibilities, and not assume that it is any one party's responsibility on their own. So I think from that particular incident, firstly, there needs to be, and what is clear, if I may add, is it doesn't help for us to depend, for example, on the Department of Labor and Employment inspectors to come and catch you out. there's construction regulations that apply to who's responsible, what's the levels of responsibility, and who's supposed to do what. So it exists in law, and best the parties all be ensure that they're educated on that and stick to the rules of the game, because that they're designed to help protect everyone. To hope that there's enough inspectors, by the way, which there aren't. And the other aspect is, are there enough knowledgeable inspectors? Is even another, a part of the equation, and we shouldn't be depending on the stick. We should rather use the carrot and the duty of care perspective in all of these, because human life, health and safety is the primary objective, the preservation thereof, that is. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I fully agree that, there shouldn't be any pointing of fingers, and hopefully the Department of Employment and Labor, through the investigations, will be able to arrive at some sort of conclusion, and the individuals who have transgressed any regulations or laws will be held accountable. But maybe from a consulting engineer's perspective, what sort of action have you taken as an organization to bring to the attention of your members, and also to and maybe in your opinion, do you feel that there's the industries where you mentioned the client, the contractor, the engineers, etc., do you believe there's any sort of fragmentation, and do you think going forward we need to collaborate a bit closer with each other? Thank you.
So maybe firstly on what we're doing. Well, I'm in this webinar today, and several others which and media articles which we have published post that incident as well. On what would be the preferred route to be taking, and what's the importance and relevance of the construction regulations which do exist, and I think that also we've got a very active school of consulting engineering. We present health and safety training courses, not to the extent where you certify people, but to at least raise the awareness of the role of all practitioners. And to that extent, we certainly advocate for the proactive inclusion of health and safety professionals at the design stages in projects. I think all too often that expertise is not taken account of enough, and we tend to leave it to it tends to be relegated to health and safety officers on a construction site who may not have the necessary expertise. Often it's a paper exercise. You tick boxes on, do you have safety talks? Yes. Do you do this, etc., etc.? But I think there's a whole lot more to it, and a whole lot more risks that the health and safety professionals, in conjunction with all the other built environment practitioners involved in these kind of projects, could bring to the party proactively, as opposed to us having to deal with the unfortunate consequences of failure in adhering to health and safety measures.
Thank you, Chris. I think that will then lead us to the next panelist, Ingrid Osborne from Saryx Engineering Group. And I think it's an opportune time as well, Ingrid, in terms of what role can artificial intelligence and other technologies play in improving occupational health and safety in South Africa.
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay. Absolutely. AI and other advanced technologies significantly improve occupational health and safety. And there are several ways in which these technologies can be applied. Your AI algorithms analyze vast amount of data from workplace incidents. They identify patterns and predict potential hazards before they occur. Machine learning models can be trained to recognize unsafe conditions and predict the likelihood of future accidents based on historical data. IoT devices, these sensors can be deployed across the workplace to continuously monitor environmental conditions, air quality, temperature, noise levels. Wearable technology, wearables are equipped with sensors that can monitor workers' vital signs, detect falls, alert them to potential dangers such as harmful gases or extreme temperature. And then there's been real advancement in virtual reality and augmented reality. And they can be used for immersive training programs. So simulating dangerous scenarios in a safe environment. And this really helps workers learn how to handle emergencies and practice safe protocols without the real world risks. AI-powered learning platforms, personalized training modules for workers. And then, of course, it just naturally, rolls over to incident reporting and management. So mobile apps and platforms like HSEC Online, we'll talk about a bit later, provide streamlined reporting of safety incidences, hazards, or near misses. And these can analyze and identify trends and then possibly suggest preventive measures. Automated documentation. I mean, it can help maintain and organize compliance documents so that we ensure that all safety protocols are followed and inspections are up to date, and that they're easily accessible during audits. And there are many other applications, but the benefits of implementing AI and other technologies is so obvious. You get an increase in regulatory compliance. So this ensures that you adhere to the South Africa's occupational health and safety regulations, mining regulations, and really reduces the risk of legal penalties and improving worker welfare. You get economic efficiency, so reducing costs associated with workplace accidents, such as medical expenses, compensation claims, downtime, those hidden costs that we don't necessarily see. And I think the most important is worker morale and retention. By implementing these solutions, digital solutions, enhances worker confidence in the workplace. And that leads to better retention rates and attracts, the skilled labor we're all looking for.
Thanks, Ingrid. I recall writing an article a few years ago, and I think some of the concerns that may come up from your health and safety practitioner, right, from an AI perspective, and you hear about it taking over a number of different career paths, etc. What is your sort of view with AI and the health and safety practitioner? Do you think it's there to take over their jobs, or is it there to augment their jobs?
Absolutely not. It's a tool. It's a tool to facilitate a better job. That's what it does. You can try and track your health and safety in a manual level arch file, but it doesn't tell you anything. You have to go looking for it. And that's generally after the fact. We want a system that actually alerts us to the necessary actions we need to take in order to remain compliant. So I look at it as an essential tool. There is no other way around it. Digitization has to happen, and it's proved to decrease incidents and accidents in the workplace.
Yes, so I also think that, part of the discussions I've had, the health and safety files, you mentioned, how do we get it into an electronic format? And I think if you look at a health and safety file being about 300 to 400 pages, what sort of initiatives do we need to engage with the relevant authorities, maybe Department of Employment and Labor as well, to try and get these health and safety files more onto an electronic format? Because I think what we do find, and as the thing Chris mentioned a bit earlier, you get a tick box exercise, or you have a health and safety file that's used from site to site, not adhering to the site specifications for that matter. How do we then, perhaps look at implementation of electronic health and safety files?
So I wonder if I could actually speak directly to HSEC Online as a product. I think that it's a cultural change that needs to occur. And I think all stakeholders need to participate. Generally speaking, a solution is created that's not accessible to perhaps, smaller contracting companies on site. We want to digitize all of those stakeholders across the workplace. And once you get ownership in terms of a digital solution within an organization, and you're able to share that with clients, that information with clients, suddenly there's transparency. There's a digital platform where you can be transparent in terms of what your compliance looks like. And it drives compliance down to the contractor level, which is, really important. They're on site probably more than anyone on big projects. So a transparent digital solution for all stakeholders is a game changer. When all stakeholders involved, when they own their own HSEC online licenses, for example, that creates responsibility and accountability. And I think the digitization process just needs to start. It just needs to start. And once you're there, it's almost like internet banking. You never, ever go back to that branch again. You know, it's just so efficient and effective.
Great. Thank you, Ingrid. And back to you, Dr. Hutchings. From an RMA perspective, and how have you partnered with the stakeholders to take coordinated action to reduce workplace injuries and fatalities?
Thanks, Sanjay. I was actually just going to make a comment on Ingrid's last comment, but I think definitely, I was just going to say, you know, I think one doesn't appreciate the roles and responsibilities that are expected of a health and safety professional. And often, you know, they become the jack of all trades. And I think something for me is, it's, you know, when we deal a lot with the safety professionals from the RMA prevention program, and you do kind of sympathize with these guys because they become the all for when it comes to safety, and they're actually a support function to business. You know, line management needs to actually take accountability when it comes to health and safety, that you know, it's not always the job of the safety professionals that are expected to do everything. And I think that's where the administrative burden becomes so much on the health and safety professional, that often they can't get outside to do their inspections, to do their audits, because of the literally the load that gets given to them. So I think, to Ingrid's point, if we can digitize and automate and, you know, ease that administrative load that is placed on them, we would be getting greater visibility outside where they actually do need to be making a difference, and sitting in an office just trying to, you know, capture information, statistics. So that was the point I wanted to make on that, just, you know, giving some kudos to the health and safety professionals, because there is a huge expectation on them. But to your point, so Rand Mutual Assurance has a prevention program, which is a program that we offer to our metals industry as a pilot. And we really believe at looking at health, safety, and wellness, and not just you know, health and safety. I think today, in this day and age, people are really feeling, you know, the load of mental health, the socioeconomic situation, the financial stresses. So all of that places a load on employees and has an impact in terms of accidents and incidents. So for us to really be effective with our program, we have to be able to work from a top-down, bottom-up. So the stakeholders are crucial, and that could be anything from the employer, who we work with as our direct client, the employees, and then a very important part of the ecosystem is the unions as well. Love them or hate them, they can be people's foes or friends, but they have a significant role in terms of driving health and safety amongst their employee base. And then obviously in terms of working very closely with different organizations. I mean, Dushen and the Minerals Council, they've got a huge amount of research that's been done in the field. Obviously, for example, our sister association, FEM, the Department of Employment and Labor. So every single stakeholder has a role to play. And I think Chris alluded to it earlier, is that I do feel we're still working in silos, and that there isn't a collective mandate to really prevent, to drive health and safety, whether that's a conversation for today or another day, but something I really strongly feel we need to do as a collaborative effort.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jessica. So yeah, I think in terms of Dushen, you know, Jessica mentioned the Minerals Council, and over the years, health and safety levels have improved in South Africa, in the South African mining industry. And what has been the driving forces of this improvement?
Thank you, Sanjay. I think a lot of the driving forces lean on really the industry coming together. So in the past, a lot of mining companies would look, you know, there would be incidents on sites, and very often some of the lessons learned and some of the sharings, you know, it happened on a very, very small scale. So currently we have, you know, much better collaboration between mining companies and the other stakeholders, including the government, the unions, supplier community as well. So a lot on the technological side has been, you know, sort of all of these entities have been facilitated, you know, through the Minerals Council. We've facilitated a lot of these conversations. And some of the initiatives include, the Fall of Ground Action Plan. That has so many, well, it has the designated pillars to address all of the complexities around fall of ground. And then if you look at our Kumbalakaya strategy, that was the first version came out just around 2019, and that's where we saw quite a steep dip just afterwards in terms of the incidents. Also in another big measure was the Stop the Bleeding campaign. So as part of CEOship, the CEOs came up with 8 actions to stop the bleeding. And in 2022, we actually saw some of that impact, from those actions. It reduced from 74 fatalities in 2021 to 49 in 2022. So a lot of these interventions are certainly having an impact. It's just that, we obviously want to accelerate things quickly to get to zero. But realistically, that aspirational target is going to take place over time due to some of the items that Ingrid and Dr. Jessica mentioned. Digitization is now coming into the foreplay. We are looking at a whole project around attaining data from our members, and some of that key data. Okay, it's lagging indicators that give you a perspective on what happened, in terms of some of the agencies. But at the same time, we're looking at the leading indicators. We're transforming from leading indicators to look at actual proactive actions that can be implemented on site in terms of better controls and better initiatives. So there's a lot of safety interventions that have also been instituted by the individual companies, and very often we don't see, or we don't see on an individual company basis how that has actually taken form. We're running a mini project now around our safety milestones to look at learning from successes, because there might have been, we might have seen a lot of incidents over the past years, but there has been some good work in the safety space that has actually reduced the fatalities, that's reduced incidents and injuries. So we want to learn from that. Very often the learning is not shared, but through our committees, like learning from incidents committees and our CEOship, our CEOship collaborative spaces, we have shares every month. Within our CEO Zero Harm Forum, we have shares through our boards, our board hour of learning. So this is leadership that we need. It's the leadership we need to drive that change, and that's actually being seen. There's much more robust collaboration in the industry in terms of the root causes, the contributing factors to incidents. All of that is being shared, and members are actually doing this quite freely. Even with the sensitivities of the loss of life on site, I think the whole industry is coming together and putting their hands together to stop the bleeding, which is it's quite encouraging. It's for being passionate about safety, as we all are. I think that's what we want. We want to collaborate, we want to find solutions, and we want to proactively drive change. And through technology, through digitization, like what Ingrid mentioned, we need to acquire that data, do the analysis, and instrument it. We can't just talk about it. We need to instrument it. And I think with the Data Are Us, we've got a campaign called Data Are Us. We're taking this whole thing to another level. We're utilizing the technologies on hand. We are dealing with the regulator, dealing with the unions, and facing these challenges and trying to implement solutions that can make an impact. And I think a lot of the interventions that have been instituted by mining companies, by miscellaneous mining companies at large, if we can consolidate those learnings quite quickly and share them and implement, then we can mitigate and reduce the numbers.
Thanks, Dushen. I think from a Minerals Council South Africa perspective, right? So there's other industries. We got the forestry, agriculture, we got the construction industry, we got the CIDB, which is the Construction Industry Development Board. How do you all engage and interact with each other? Are there any sort of conversations around health and safety with these entities?
Yeah, we often look at other industries for just gauging on some of the interventions that they've instituted. In the past, some of our colleagues have even spoken to NASA. They've spoken to some of the specialists and the experts the real intellectuals on those ends to gain from what interventions they've actually laid out. And also internationally, you know, we've got the Vision Zero campaign. So we don't just speak to people in the mining sector. We talk to people outside. Yeah, we talk to other entities on the forestry side and agricultural, often also in the manufacturing community and the likes of the automotive sector. We often talk to those entities as well to sort of gauge on, you know, what are some of the actions that they are implementing to reduce or to improve their safety regimes. So the conversations definitely happen, you know, just beyond our mining sector, but we also like to collaborate with the experts within our community, because mining is very intricate. You know, there's a lot of things that are very specific to our sector. So there's a lot of experts around. So we've seen, if I can take, for example, the collision prevention system project. It's a multifaceted project, you know, that involves the merging of, you know, the DMR suppliers, the MQA, the unions, all of the different stakeholders. And there's a need. There was actually a strong need to get everyone into the same room, and we managed to achieve that. There's some challenges still, you know, after the regulations got lifted, especially in terms of the 2 TMM regulations. However, I think the industry is moving forward with it, and a lot of companies have actually, you know, shown the leadership. And before regulations could even be implemented, they looked at, you know, getting these technologies on board and trialing it and testing it and seeing how they could work for them. And that has improved on operations. Of course, you know, with technology introduction, you also get a lot of complexities. So there's a lot involved with that. So I think there's a roadmap that we're paving in terms of all of these streams. And yeah, from a multifaceted or sort of a multi-sectoral approach, as you call it, I think we can learn a lot from all of the different dimensions. I think safety is such a wide and such a broad topic. There's a lot we can, you know, we can definitely streamline a lot of commonalities, if I can say that. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, I agree with you. And I think also of interest as well, what we've started doing from a data perspective, right? So we always say that, you know, when you look at the statistics and, you know, 50 people have passed away in a year or been killed on site, etc., or at the workplace. And it doesn't necessarily paint a true picture in terms of the pain and suffering that the individual goes through or the families, etc. And what we'd call it's numbers without tears, right? So I think what will be a good recommendation as well is what we've started, for example, is just to start getting the description of the incidents as well and getting real life stories of the dependents of the people who've been killed on site. And you know, of course, if somebody's seriously injured, for example, they're generally the breadwinner in a family, and that has a multiplier effect in terms of affecting a number of other individuals in society as well. So definitely from a health and safety perspective, very important to ensure compliance on site.
Sanjay,
Thanks.
sorry, it's Jessica. I just wanted to come in. I think also one of the things that employers or organizations get fixated on is you know, KPIs in this particular space, and it becomes you know, very difficult when you're measuring safety, performance, and improvement. And I think to your point, you know, numbers without tears. A fatal is not just a scorecard with, you know, we've got 1, we've got 2. There's a whole ecosystem. There's a community. There's dependents. There's family. So I think as organizations, we really need to be better at not just looking at it from a number perspective, but as you say, the narrative around it, the impact that it could have. It's not just one person that's lost their life. That person who's working in a small steelworks could be the breadwinner, but for a family, but also the community. So, you know, there's something that I think as employers, we really do need to be better at not just using safety as a lagging indicator. Also, I think one of the panelists mentioned, you know, leading indicators as well, but not just putting a number to a life. I think that's we're really doing, you know, a disservice to our citizens in the country.
Definitely, thank you, Jessica.
Sanjay, if I can add to that as well.
Yeah.
As the Minerals Council, we also have a sister component to safety called MOSH, and that's the Mining Occupational Safety and Health Department. And what that department looks at is leading practices. So leading practices in fall of ground, in transport and machinery, and also the health aspects like noise and dust. And they've come up with a lot of tools that the industry is currently using. So we try to promote the adoption of these leading practices to also assist the industry in improving on their safety performance. And this has proven well to some extent, and there's a lot we can share in that space.
Great, thanks, Dushen. Yeah.
Sanjay,
Yeah.
if I may weigh in on this very interesting discussion and I think we tend to focus on health and safety, and we talk about on-site, which is a ongoing present activity with a future aspiration to finish off some kind of structure or building or whatever. But I think equally important in the realm of health and safety, that same duty of care exists for the owners of all assets, infrastructure assets, because we tend to overlook a disused mine, Slimes Dam collapse. Somebody owned it. People lost their lives. Limpopo, a disused, abandoned building, roof collapsed, killed a couple of people. And the point I'm trying to make is there need to be some consequences and responsibility taken for the owners of these assets, because you can't assume that I'm no longer using it, I can just leave it. It needs to be maintained because people's lives are at stake, even with disused infrastructure that we see all over the show. Thank you.
Fully agreed, Chris. And I think of interest, right? So Department of Employment and Labor, and we seem to have the best health and safety legislation in this country. And not that I'm picking on South Africa, but I think it's a global phenomenon where we see that millions of people pass away every year as a result of occupational injuries and diseases. And I think definitely regulations and legislations are quite pivotal in terms of ensuring the health and safety compliance. But do you believe that the Occupational Health and Safety Act is being effectively enforced?
If you're targeting me to respond, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
I was the last speaker, so yeah. Look, I think probably not to its fullest extent for several reasons. There may be a huge shortage of knowledge and education, which needs to be shared. People need to be brought on board. It's also not of necessity a top-down approach. It has to be bottom-up as well, because people who need to be sensitive to the fact that they may find themselves unduly exposed. And so I don't need to be there if you're unduly exposing me, and you can enforce your rights. And so there's a plethora of education that needs to be put in place to assist people. For example, in a former environment, in a factory itself, we had huge amounts of incidents, and a survey of the employees in a production environment, quite a dangerous one, precast concrete manufacturing, that is. The general attitude of the workforce was completely fatalistic. And it took a lot of work to get through to the hearts and minds of people to move away from that mindset and accept that it is within their hands as well. Yes, the sky may fall on you at any point in time. We don't know if that will ever happen. If you read the little, recall the story when we were little kids. But most of the time in a working environment, you can, avoid those kinds of injuries or risks. And that's where the education, just sensitizing people to, the need for general well-being, and the fact that you can also look after yourself. You have a duty of care to your family too. And then there's the last one that I think that also the myth needs to be dispelled, is if you get injured, that you may necessarily be compensated by the company. And that's not true. And it's a horrible myth, especially in manufacturing environment, that people believe that they may be compensated and unfortunately, it then ends up being proven that they've been negligent. So you lose both a finger and you don't get compensated. It doesn't help you. So I think there's where the entirety of the responsibility has to come into play, bottom up and top down. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Sorry, Sanjay,
I think it's,
if I can come in there as well, I think on the Mine Health and Safety Act, that's actually the primary regulatory stance for the mining industry. We have to follow the Mine Health and Safety Act. The Occupational Health and Safety Act is also adhered to some extent, depending on the activities on site, like construction or manufacturing. So that cuts across a broad range of industries, but Mine Health and Safety Act is our predominant look to in terms of regulations.
I think,
Thanks,
Sanjay, sorry, just also
Sanjay.
on that, I think one of the, and it's not a contentious point, but a question that always keeps coming up is, why do we have two different acts in South Africa governing health and safety? And certainly I know our colleagues in the Department of Labour and in the DMRE would, have varying opinions, but I think it does create a little bit of unease, because the perception is that the Mine Health and Safety Act is better enforced and better regulated than the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And that could be to Chris's earlier comments, as to reasons why it may not be as well enforced. But I think, the perception could be because in mining, you've got international shareholders, you've got really big brands and companies who don't want to be known, to be seen to be unsafe. Whereas, poor little Jessica and her little steelworks business, is just minor in comparison. So I think we do need to, as a collective, again, start asking questions. The inspectors from the DMRE can come in Section 54, Section 55 very, very quickly. But I think we find that perhaps health and safety hasn't necessarily been given the importance when it comes to the social impact that one needs to do from a country perspective. And I think it generally, as a country, we don't enforce. I mean, you can go through a red robot, you can bribe a policeman if you get a traffic fine. So I think it's a much bigger systemic issue than what we're talking about today. That does really need to be tabled at sort of higher up if we really want to make a difference in terms of saving lives, preventing harm and injury, looking after the communities that people serve. So yeah, I think this really is something that runs very deep. And when we talk about top down, it's not just organizations, it's the government, that also needs to play a role here in ensuring that health and safety, it's a constitutional right. It is part of everyone's ESG campaigns these days, but are we really living it when it comes to organizational values?
Fully agreed, Jessica. Thank you. Ingrid, from the Saryx HSEC online solution, how does it help organization keep track of health and safety documents and compliance? Maybe a bit more insight. Thanks.
So HSEC Online, the digital solution, provides businesses of all sizes, and that's really important, and all industries. And that's also really important because we've implemented it in the forestry industry, we've implemented it in mining, food and beverage, bulk material handling. It doesn't really matter which industry you're in. You can implement a digital solution to manage health and safety. But HSEC Online has a set of comprehensive tools to effectively manage health and safety documents and ensure compliance. And by centralizing the information, automating alerts, facilitating incident reporting and risk management, and offering robust analytics, HSEC Online can then help these organizations maintain a safe working environment, adhere to regulations and changing regulations, and continuously improve their health and safety performance. And again, it's not just a solution for big corporates, but this also empowers contractors to manage their businesses conscientiously. And by being able to share their data, the required data to their clients on a digital platform, the clients can then assess their efforts on a centralized digital platform. This transparency ensures that everyone is engaged and accountable. So the HSEC Online platform is all about inclusion, communication, and training. And we recognize that putting reliable systems in to improve health and safety of all involved, from the corporate to the contractors, and we work together to try and cultivate an understanding of what we're trying to achieve here, then we have success. And by engaging all stakeholders, we cultivate honesty, and this leads to transparency. And transparency builds trust, which then reduces fear. And we know that there's a lot of fear when it comes to health and safety, reporting of incidences, near misses, etc. So we have had amazing success with the HSEC Online platform because these values are embedded in the product itself. And this is how we become a safer workforce. And HSEC Online is just that, a transparent digital platform for all stakeholders within the workplace.
Thanks, Ingrid. I'm not sure if you have any particular case study, right? So if you maybe have a company that's been utilizing this particular system, and how has that improved the health and safety compliance, and has there been a material reduction in incidents as well?
Absolutely. We did a case study. It was actually published in an article a little while ago, where that company had 100% zero harm for the first time in that year. In addition, they had gone through several audits with absolutely no findings. And I think that this is really, it really speaks to the success of digital solutions. We human beings, after all, we need to try and reduce human error where we can, and managing compliance is something that we can all, you don't want to spend your time flipping through safety files. You want to be able to be told when something's expired, be able to, act on it prior to that expiry date. We know it's coming up in 3 weeks' time, and this has to be updated. Go and get it done. And having, your health and safety practitioners on site monitoring all these contractors, they can then see when someone's falling below compliance. Start to integrate into access control systems. If your priority one documentations have expired, or someone is not fit for purpose in terms of their job description, deny them access at the gate. Start to be proactive in terms of trying to curb, any accidents or incidences that could have been prevented way ahead of time.
Thanks, Ingrid. Jessica, for your, why is it vital that employers ensure that their employees have adequate coverage for occupational injuries and diseases?
I think, Sanjay, that question is always something I think is the obvious, right? I firmly believe people don't come to work to kill themselves. And if they do, that's a psychosocial issue that really needs to be addressed. But I think in this country, with the stats that we've just shared today, which are really just a slither of a cake, we cannot afford to be losing lives. We've got an economy that we need to get into place. We've got to future generations, to leave legacies behind. So for me, it's a no-brainer. We want people to come to work in a healthy and safe way, and we want them to return home in the same way. And I think most companies feel that. I think it's just given, I think your opening today was all the challenges that we face as a society, and what do you balance? You think about I always use the analogy, Jessica, steelworks. That's, what do I invest my money in, a generator to keep my business going because of load shedding, or do I spend that money in terms of health and safety? And to us as professionals, we know what you should be doing, but a guy's got to run a business, and if he doesn't, he closes the doors. People are on short time already as a result of that. You then create the domino impact of people losing income, not getting overtime. They can't take the same salary. They resort to substances to overcome the financial pressures. They then, have marital issues. It then becomes, mental health issues. So this domino impact of not creating a health and safety workplace not only impacts how people present themselves at work, but it also impacts on how they end up going, back home. So for me, organizations really need to do better at recognizing the benefits of health and safety and having, fit and healthy employees in terms of having safe workplaces, equipment that is safe. I mean, we see a lot in the steel industry, machinery without guarding, companies accepting that level of risk, having already have an employee lost 3 fingers in a previous incident, yet they continue. So what are the value systems when it comes to, our most prized assets, our employees? But I think Ingrid has touched on it in terms of, the domino effects of compensation costs, there's legal costs. And then for the employees, right? If they don't feel that their workplace is healthy and safe, or they don't feel valued, they become despondent, they get withdrawn, they become perhaps careless at what they're doing because they don't feel valued. So that contributes to accidents and incidents. So for me, it's something that it's a no-brainer to all of us as professionals. I just think we really do need to be better at a collective of practicing what we preach in terms of making sure that this really is an important business imperative as any other, financial means, production, etc. So yeah, I think that's most of the colleagues have already addressed it, but happy if anyone else wants to add to that.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Sanjay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, Jessica said it quite nicely. I think essentially, as safety practitioners, we constantly have to look at innovating towards improving things. We looked at company bow ties, and bow ties from the perspective of looking at control measures for that high energy release aspect that leads to an incident. Control failures, mitigating controls. We're constantly looking at these things and consolidating from the industry to actually we've actually developed industry bow ties in 4 different areas. And industry is using that to improve on their risk profiles. When you spoke about challenges, some of the challenges that we will have going forward is indeed, as we go deeper into the ground, with the complexity of our ore bodies, the risk profile increases. So that also opens another can of worms in terms of, what's required to improve safety, especially for underground mines. So that's something we're working on quite proficiently. And there's been a lot of things in terms of advanced ore body knowledge, seismicity learnings that's really complex, leading practices around fall of ground, and transport and machinery interventions that are actually making an impact. So these are the things we're looking at promoting, from a leading practice perspective and from a case study perspective. There's numerous aspects like this. And I agree with Jessica, that a lot of these things requires the collaborative space. We all need to sort of come together and share these learnings. As a mining industry, we're sort of getting there. I think we're getting there quite strongly because these collaborative spaces and the committees and the leadership forums we have within the Minerals Council actually enhances the conversations, which is quite important. There's a lot of sharing in terms of risk propensity and supervisor turnover. Change management is the big topic nowadays as well. I mean, you find people that are leaving the mines, and when new people come on, they don't necessarily take on the what was left, like a electricity diagram for that matter. A lot of that is left out of the, it's not filed properly and it's not carried forward. There's things like contractor management that comes into the fore. That's a big problem because contractors that come on need to adopt the philosophies that the mine has entrenched in their personnel. And very often that's missed, and that leads to incidents. So those are some of the challenges that we're trying to attack, to also help the industry.
Fantastic, Dushen. I think one of the challenges. Yeah,
Sorry,
thanks.
Sanjay.
Yeah. So I think, definitely, Dushen. I think from a I just want to make one point. Thanks. So I think from a mining perspective, it's generally a well-controlled environment. And, one of the challenges I noticed from the George incident, right? And it was quite sad. I mean, many of the employees who came to site that day it was their first day, and many of them were standing on the side of the road. And unfortunately, that was the last day at work for them, right? And I think it's definitely a very serious challenge within South Africa. And noting from the general high number of unemployed workers, we have a lot to do in terms of upskilling and training the entire South African economy, right? So to getting them to a particular point. So one of the initiatives, for example, where we spoke about many years ago is how do we get to the schooling environment and start educating the scholars in terms of the potential risks that are in the working environment. Because what we would identify, for example, is when you look at the number of fatalities. So when you drill a bit deeper, then you'll look at, for example, what day of the week, what hour, what shift, etc. But then the other aspect, which is also something we've noted, is the younger individuals as well. So I think, we have to have a very targeted approach, and I'm seeing a lot of synergies that are coming across here that we need to maybe further engage on. But yeah, I'll hand back to you, Ingrid. You wanted to make a comment on that? Thanks.
Thanks, Sanjay. Apologies. Just to speak to Dushen's point about adoption for contractors, digital solutions for contractors. Some of our biggest advocates for supporting a digital transformation, in the health and safety space, is a massive cost saving for them. First of all, you can get all your safety file approvals done prior to even getting to site from your office. There's no waiting in queues on site, waiting for someone to manually go through an entire safety file. And so you can actually start to approve documents from 700 contracting companies, reasons for rejections. And that company then has a transparent link to the site to actually understand am I site ready? Am I business ready now? These are the requirements. It's in black and white. There's accountability, there's audit trails. And they can get organized prior to getting to site, which I think is really important. So, it's digitization for contractors is a massive cost saving. We also are an engineering company, and we do a lot of engineering work on these sites. So we use our own software in order to try and manage this process. And you won't look back. The minute you digitize this process, you don't look back.
Ingrid, could I ask, and sorry, hijacked, Sanjay, how do we, so we've had, for example, contractors and health and safety is not always well entrenched in contractors. Having these systems could be only as effective as the people that operate them correctly. How have you overcome sort of people being able to override if the contractor doesn't have, for example, updated risk assessments, or his or their employees, medical surveillance hasn't been done? Is the system capable of not enabling users to override and say, just go through, it's fine? Because I think that's something we do. I fully agree with you. Contractor health and safety is a massive area that needs improvement.
So if you imagine a single centralized sort of data hub where you can actually see the compliance from contractor A to contractor Z on one platform, and one contractor is sitting at, and your priority one documents like your medical certificate has expired. Number one, that contractor is going to be non-compliant. Okay, if he then arrives to site and you've done your integration into access control system, he won't be allowed in. But also, all responsible parties can see that. The contractor can see it. The worker can see it. The health and safety practitioner on site can see it. The corporate can see it. So there's suddenly a level of transparency, and the fix is easy. Just go and update your medical check. So when you have transparency on a digital system, there's no really way to hide. Everyone's watching. Everyone is watching. Your other co-workers within your company are aware of what the compliance situation is like. So it's now there's a give and take, there's an accountability, everyone starts to get involved. And what we've seen is when you adopt digitization and you actually share information like that, it drives healthy competition to be the best. I'm the most compliant company because everyone's watching. And it becomes a positive, enforcement. And it's collaboration. Like we were just talking in the chat to someone. Collaboration here is key between all parties. And the sharing of this information is key to the success of zero harm.
No,
Thank you, Ingrid.
Sanjay,
And we'll move to,
So-
okay, Chris, one more comment for me, then we'll move to the next item. Thanks.
yes, thank you. I mean, I'd like to weigh in on this. You know, I think systems, processes, all of that are really good to have in place. But maybe there needs to be more said, and I think Jessica touched on it, is identifying systemic issues which may lead to people getting injured, because I do agree, nobody wakes up with the intention of killing themselves. And they may unwittingly, because of, and our country, South Africa, is a very complex environment. You know, there's so many things that affect potential or affect employees. And how does that weigh on their minds when they go into the workplace that may, you know, lead to them exposing themselves unduly and sometimes even unconsciously to risk, because and so I would want to say that maybe employers need to put more energy into employee well-being, identifying such symptoms in advance. I mean, even our office workers, our staff these days, with the pandemic and the post-pandemic era, people think often that, hey, you know, I'm quite fine working at home. Meantime, I'm going through some serious mental stresses, and I'm really not coping. I'm drowning. Can somebody help me? You know, that kind of situation. And that's not only prevalent in an office workplace, but those same kind of mental issues affect people on construction sites, in mines, and wherever they are. So maybe the proactive identification and addressing those would help prevent the need for all of these administrative processes that, you know, which, you know, at the end of the day, become a record of what you had in place, but the consequence of the employee getting injured might not have been 100% preventable. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chris, and to the rest of the panel. We'll now move to the Q&A. And maybe we could start with the question from Richard. So on the agricultural side, what measures can be taken to reduce or improve in controlling of fire, as it's fire season and there were a lot of injuries that have occurred? I'm not sure if anybody on the panel can take that question.
So maybe if I can, maybe if not from a construction perspective, but from a former life, you know, one of the biggest challenges is, especially in August, in parts of the country, it's extremely windy. You know, making fires is totally discouraged. Controlled burning even becomes high risk. But I am aware that in most rural environments, they do have these fire management agencies, and I don't know how effective they are. They were put in place many years ago, and it's probably really a really tricky one to say that they're preventable, because all it takes is for a motorist to flick their cigarette. Some people still smoke real cigarettes. Flick it out of the window and the dry grass, and there goes the countryside. So not an easy one, because it's not confined to a controlled burning in an agricultural environment. It could be an inadvertent tossing of a cigarette that doesn't go out on its own, just by somebody on a roadside trip. So that's, you know, not a straightforward, easy answer. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris. I think there are quite a few organizations that you know, facilitate and do the firefighting, clearing of fields, etc. For example, working on fire, and you've heard recently they're traveling through to Canada as well, representing South Africa. So I think what's a key part of it for most industries would be training for those particular employees, but I think for the general public as well, And you would find, for example, not just in agriculture, but if you look at the squatter settlements as well, during winter, we find that there's an increase in terms of fires breaking out. So what we would potentially require in those particular instances is more of an advanced warning system. So that's something maybe government and maybe the communities as well need to implement in those particular areas. But I definitely know it's a major concern, where we see that burns are quite a significant cause of injuries and fatalities as well. There was a question from Scott to Dushen, and he wanted to find out, does the Minerals Council publish the detailed statistics on the causes of these safety issues?
Yeah, so thank you for that, Scott. Essentially, we get all of the information from the DMRE, and we can share certainly, the contributing factors, on our agency perspective or level, to date. So we got all of those pie charts and the data that we can share with you, certainly.
Okay, thanks. Okay, from Marvin, so what is the best way to introduce a safe working way in a company where culture is with more old employees and safety reactive, I would think, or safety related, sorry. So I'm not sure. I think culture is quite critical, and maybe the older employees, maybe to get an update from that. I'm not sure, Jessica, can you maybe answer?
I was going to say, I think safety culture is a subject that's underexplored in South Africa, and has a huge impact. I mean, it also leads to the following question that I think Raquel was asking about, psychosocial risk factors. So building a culture is not something that happens over time, and it's all about leading from the front. So I remember once going on site, and I was accompanied by senior management, and they called an employee over for not wearing their reflector vest. And I looked at the manager and I said, unfortunately, you're on the same premises as the employer, and you're not wearing, your reflector vest. So you've got to walk the talk. You've got to lead by example. If you want a safety culture where you want employees to really be valued, it starts with leadership. So for me, I feel education of management and leadership about, the legal liability, about the regulations. There's not a lot of understanding about health and safety. People will say, oh, yeah, there's a 16.1, a 16.2, someone might go to jail if, but, maybe. And that's sort of the limited understanding of the legal responsibilities that, are for senior management. So for me, safety culture is not something that's going to happen overnight, but it has to be led from the front. Various activities, from visible felt leadership. But I think one of the ways of really creating a culture is also through communication. So if someone reports something that's unsafe and they see it again tomorrow and they see it again a week later, they eventually stop reporting it because they keep saying, well, safety is not taken seriously, so I'm going to stop reporting. If something's reported, it needs to get fixed. There needs to be communication. There needs to be feedback, so that people know that, we really do value safety. We know it's important. It's not something we just, tell our shareholders. So I'm not going to give a quick answer in terms of how to build a safety culture. There's a lot, and I'm happy if anyone wants to speak to me about that. But it's also about, do companies have wellness programs in place, proper employee assistance programs, availability to instant support, in terms of whatever psychosocial issues they have. Just making sure that people lead by example, for me, is only going to win it. But yeah, happy to chat about it.
Yeah, if I can add to that as well, Sanjay. So essentially, yeah, I would like to just, I think Dr. Jessica hit upon those key points. But yeah, also to just reiterate, behavioral culture is something that requires a continuous improvement prerogative. It's not something that's going to happen immediately. It's going to be transitionally. And there's many dimensions to it. The MOSH process that we use, it's a whole philosophy around looking at the technical aspects, behavioral aspects, and leadership aspects. And I think Dr. Jessica highlighted that. Visible felt leadership is something that we promote quite strongly. And a lot of our mining companies are looking towards their leaders at executing that, which is being done quite proficiently. And that was one of the Stop the Bleeding actions to encourage visible felt leadership. So there's a lot of things we can share in that space as well, from a behavioral point of view, because very often you can have all of the safety technical things in place, but the culture is not, it's just not meeting the requirements, and incidents continue to happen. You can have such a robust safety strategy, but things are just not working, and that all leans on the behavioral aspects. The way the sort of culture that's been that's come into play in on that operation, and that requires a lot of it requires continuous improvement in different areas to improve. So it's not a simple answer, certainly. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it reminds me of one of the incidents that we had as a injury on duty, where a supervisor, approached another employee and accused them of potential theft, and that employee then turned around and beat them up, and they became an injury on duty. But I think also it's a case where you provide instructions, or there's incidents that occur at work. It's always a case that never assume that somebody has the same sort of perception of reality as you do as well. Many people have, as we've mentioned, psychosocial issues, mental health. And the more you drill into a particular incident, you'd see, for example, the employee traveled hundreds of kilometers to get to work, sleeping late at night. So I think a lot more detail and analysis needs to be done in terms of how incidents do occur. Ingrid, there's a question for you, right? So with the digitized health and safety file, how will site-specific risk assessments be done? How is the information then channeled to the workforce? Compliance is what we want to achieve, but the intention is to share this information with the workforce. I just can't get to the rest of the answer, but the question, but maybe to hand over to you.
Yeah, so site-specific risk assessments are essential. I mean, and H Second Line caters for that, absolutely. And we believe that when you are implementing a digital solution, health and safety, it should be inclusive. If you need access to a specific risk assessments, or you're doing specific risk assessments, of course you're going to have access to it, within the solution. Every single employee, every single piece of equipment, every asset that you actually load onto H Second Line has its own personal private QR code. That QR code can be scanned and prompted, if it's a piece of equipment, for the risk assessment that is required right then digitally, and it can be digitally signed off. So absolutely, this information needs to be shared. Again, H Second Line is built on communication, transparency, and collaboration. Everyone gets trained on the system. Everyone is involved in making sure that the health and safety solution, works for them and works for the organization.
Okay, thank you, Ingrid. The next question is from previous Nkopodi, and the question is the employer allowed to allow the contractor to continue with work if the letter of good standing is expired? And I think what he's mentioned is the subcontractor allowed to continue with work. So maybe I can answer this. Yeah, so in terms of Section 89 of the COID Act, if the main contractor has a letter of good standing, those employees are covered under his policy for COIDA purposes. If he then contracts with a subcontractor on site, and if that subcontractor has a valid letter of good standing, those employees or any injuries that transpire thereof will fall under the subcontractor's policy. From a COIDA perspective, if that subcontractor's letter of good standing expires or is not in good standing, then the main contractor takes on the risk of the subcontractor's employees. So any incidents will then, potentially fall under the main contractor's policy. So definitely a high risk if the subcontractor is operating without a letter of good standing, for that matter. Okay. They mostly ask for documentations that is there to be submitted physically, mainly during inductions. And I'm sure that maybe is for you, Ingrid. I'm not sure if you could maybe answer that particular question. I'm not sure if it's clear enough.
So it depends on the site, obviously, on the safety index file in terms of what documentation are required for site, but it's generally, letter of good standing, medicals, proof of expertise. If I'm an engineer, I need my engineering certificate, insurance. So those are the typical documentations that would need to be submitted during inductions. Physically, I don't know, maybe someone from the Minerals Council can answer the issue with physical documents and the physical signature as opposed to a digital signature. Those documents, sometimes are required to be there physically. They're later uploaded, obviously having then been signed. But maybe we can speak to that digital signature issue within the Occupational Health and Safety Rules and the Mining Act. Dushen, do you have anything with regards to?
Sorry, just give me some context again. I was just typing an answer to another question that I saw. So please give me some context.
In some cases, documents need to be physically signed. The DMR won't accept a digital signature on certain documents. But as we moved into, a more technical sort of like, digital environment, how do we circumvent that problem?
Yeah, I think in terms of suppliers continuing at work on site, I know the Section 21 agreements requires, the actual signatures on contractual documents. So in that case, I don't think they accept digital signatures. It's just accepted in some cases in terms of procedures, as far as I know, but it also varies across the board. So yeah, I think the hard and fast rule is from a regulatory stance, it's required that you sign on the document, original documents. So they don't permit digital signatures, as far as I know.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And yeah.
But such great digital solutions, like DocuSign or whatever the case may be, that actually are really, working well. Is there any going to be a change to digital signatures being accepted?
I think there could possibly be, from an efficiency point of view, it makes so much of sense, I think there needs to be a migration to that sort of thing. But I'm not sure. I'll be honest. I'll be lying to you. I'm not sure on the latest on that one.
Okay, thank you, Ingrid. Thank you, Dushen, for that. So we're going to start wrapping up now, everybody, and maybe final thoughts from you, Jessica, in terms of this interaction.
I think firstly to all my colleagues online, the panelists, and to all the listeners, I think we need more of these, certainly more engagements, more conversations. I don't think we did today justice in terms of all the things that we've all raised, and I think we all wanted to go further, but obviously in the interest of time. I think for me, it's about really making sure that we practice what we preach. Health and safety is every single person's responsibility. It's not just the employees. It's not just the health and safety professionals' responsibilities. So as leadership and management, we need to lead by example. We need to make sure that this is something that we fully want to appreciate and entrench within organizations. I think as a community, as a fraternity, we need to do better at working as a collective, instead of sort of either in our sectors or in our industries. As professionals, we need to come together. We need to share the lessons that are being learned, the advances that have been making in other industries, and also appreciating that the small medium enterprises are probably the most affected by all of these challenges that we face, and how do we give them the assistance and the support when they just are grappling to make ends meet. It's not that they don't think safety is important. They're just priorities just other necessities. So for me, I'm always happy to engage, always happy to have further conversations, and yeah, just really would like us to start working together as a collective. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Ingrid, from your side.
So yeah, I mean, there's a great quote by David Sarkis. He's a great safety enthusiast. Same old leadership strategies and tactics equals same old culture. So I would just encourage people to start to digitize as quickly as possible. Just start. And once you've started, and once you've, really transformed, this very cumbersome sort of like manual solution into something that's really streamlined, efficient, accessible to everyone, you won't look back. It's just a matter of starting to implement it. You will be successful. Thank you, everyone.
Ingrid. Thank you, Ingrid. Chris, from your side.
Yeah. So Sanjay, I think, and exactly to echo the sentiments expressed by Jessica, huge topic, way too little time. And I think certainly what is needed here is a whole lot more information, education, and collaboration. I mean, just cite the very quick examples. Even in the Department of Labor, there isn't enough knowledge on what is applicable in terms of the Health and Safety Act, in terms of the 16.1, 16.2 appointment versus a construction site and the construction regulations. And that the kind of power play that people see has got no place in this environment. It's best we know that we're doing the right thing so that everybody we're all on the same page. It's not a case of I'm in control and you do as I say, even if what you're saying doesn't make sense. So I think it's important, that we have more of the same, more of this kind of stuff, educating as many people as possible, including ourselves, more and more.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris. And then final thoughts from you, Dushen.
Thank you, Sanjay. Yeah, I quite agree with my colleagues. Need more time, but I think this has been great. From my side, I think for all of us, safety and health is really personal. Every time I see a safety communication of an incident or anything related, it goes beyond the mind. It goes to the heart and soul. And we are very, very passionate about the work we do. We live for it. And we really want to institute measures that can improve the performance. I think that's what we want to gear ourselves towards. And I think we are making progress, just that safety is a journey. The safety and health performance of our sector is a journey. And I believe we're getting there with the way we've performed over the past 10 years. We've done a deep dive analysis, and there's been many, many good progress, informative projects that have been well coordinated and well implemented for that matter. And that's why we're running a learning from successes mini project to see, where those core learnings can be shared. And I think just for the community or the colleagues also that are the people are on this call, there's a wealth of information that you can look to. As Minerals Council, we open to the conversation, and we have our website, but we also have the MOSH website that has a repository of information for your operations. So let's keep the conversations going. Let's keep sharing. Let's keep collaborating. I'm very, very happy to also share in some way or the other on some of the work we've done at the Minerals Council that's also in progress. And as safety thought leaders, I think we need to continue these conversations and continue sharing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dushen, and thank you to the panelists as well. So, from my side, I definitely agree that collaboration and synergies that can be created from this particular session, and looking forward to implementing solutions. I think that's what's going to be key in terms of driving or reducing the number of health and safety incidents and injuries on sites as well. And I think as a collective, in South Africa, we of course the most industrialized economy in the continent. And how do we become thought leaders as well, right? So how do we then engage further with our colleagues in other countries as well? And I think to make South Africa, I think, progressive in terms of driving health and safety compliance and improving it across the board. So thank you so much to Creamer Media as well. Thank you to attendees for participating in this event as well. Hoping you found it fruitful. I'll now hand over to Shannon. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sanjay. That brings us to the end of our webinar. I'd like to say thank you very much to our facilitators, Sanjay and Munnoo, for enabling an engaging and thought-provoking discussion. Thank you also to our panelists, Jessica Hutchings from Rand Mutual Assurance, Chris Campbell from Consulting Engineers South Africa, Ingrid Osborne from Saryx Engineering Group, and Dushen Naidoo from Minerals Council South Africa. Thank you to our partner, Electra Mining Africa, and our sponsors, Rand Mutual Assurance, Saryx Engineering Group, and Alcohol Breathalyzers for their support in making this webinar possible. And finally, thank you to the attendees for taking the time to join us for this discussion on health and safety in industry and mining. Thank you also to everyone who participated in our live Q&A. We have taken note of everyone's interest in this topic, so keep an eye on our website for more on this in the future. Our next webinar takes place on 21 August at 2 p.m. and will focus on women in business. The link to register for that event has been shared in the chat. The recording of today's webinar will be sent to you in due course, and if you have any additional questions, please be in touch. You can reach us at shannon@creamermedia.co.za. Thank you so much for your time. Goodbye.